Hi friends, how are you? Today we are here to discuss about the international payment terms while negotiating the international contract. We have to be very much conscious and we have to be very well versed about the payment terms we are going to select, because on the basis of these payment terms we will be able to evaluate the risk we are going to take. Even the comfort level we have maintained for our company and the favor we have given to our buyer. So these are very important to understand these payment terms first and the risk associated with those payment terms, and how whether we can tackle those payment terms in terms of documentation, in terms of the company's financial soundness. Let's discuss all these payment terms one by one, and we have to study their pros and cons, so that we can select the best payment terms for our next international contract. In our contract, if we have convinced our buyer to pay 100% advance payment, so which in terms of payment by the supplier has become very secure, while the buyer has to face buyer is not that much secure, because buyer has given all the payment to the buyer to the supplier. Now buyer depends on the credibility and the professional and the commitment of the supplier the supplier has made with the buyer, because there's a 100% risk associated with 100% payment made by the buyer, because the goods may be late, and there may be some violation of the violation of any of the points given in the contract. So in order to minimize, in order to reduce the risk in the 100% advance payment, the buyer can seek the buyer can propose not the 100% advance payment, but buyer can pay partial advance payment, let's say 50% or 30% advance payment, and rest of the payment can be agreed on CAD, cash against documents, or even LC, letter of credit. So this will definitely reduce the risk for the buyer, because buyer has 70% payment in hand and only 30% payment has been given to the supplier. So this is in case of advance payment, buyer and seller have to mutually agree on the percentage of the advance payment, whether they are going to take 100% advance payment or less than 100% advance payment. And second point is that if the buyer is going to pay less than 100% advance payment, let's suppose 30 or 40% advance payment, so what will be the payment term for the rest of the payment? So it depends on the buyer's credibility, supplier's credibility, and the trust level between buyer and supplier. Normally we can choose the payment term like 40% advance and 60% either CAD, cash or against documents, or LC, letter of credit. So both these terms, if we talk about which term is more secure for the buyer, so I would recommend that LC is rest of the amount if paid through LC, this is more secure for the supplier and buyer both. And the next payment term is DA, documents against acceptance. Yes, there is some sort of risk associated with this payment term, that documents against acceptance, that once the shipping documents are presented by the shipper to the buyer's bank, the documents are accepted. On the basis of this acceptance, the buyer's bank releases the document to the buyer, and the buyer takes the original documents, and on the basis of those original documents, the shipment is released. The goods are physically released to the buyer, and after some time, let's suppose at 60 days, after 60 days, when the payment becomes mature, and if there is some sort of conflict, if there is some sort of dispute, and the buyer refuses to pay on that day at the maturity, so sometimes bank don't have that much strength or the ability or the binding condition to recover the payment from the buyer, and ultimately shipper has to suffer. So that is very important that whenever we come to the terms of DA, a seller must seek a credit report of the bank, of the buyer's bank, and the buyer through his or her bank, so that a satisfaction level could be established, and then they can work on this DA. DA is really very risky. A buyer can enjoy big aspects of this payment term, and buyer can even take advantage of this payment term, and the payment can be unnecessarily delayed, and sometimes bank has no control on it. Finally, if we talk about the payment term, that is open account. Open account means that buyer and seller has established some sort of understanding. No banks are involved in, and they have to, they can ship the goods directly to the buyer without involving any bank. It means that buyer and seller can mutually decide the payment term, mutually decide the time period. After that, for the payment, they can decide on 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever they have, they are comfortable with. They will decide the payment term, and bank has least or no involvement in such payment terms, in such transaction, in such contract. But on the basis of mutual understanding, buyer and seller can work on this payment term as well. Till next video, thank you very much. Goodbye. Have a nice day.